Hey, it's Jess, and I'm back with another speed build today for the Haven's Hollow save file, which is my missing person murder mystery save file, kind of similar to the Silent Pine save file if you know of that one. And today we're back with another community lot build, my favorite. I hate building community lots, but this one is a church that's based off of a church I found on Google. I looked up New England church and it was like one of the first ones to show up. If you want to see the inspiration, it's out there in the universe. But this is like a really pretty church. It's all white, which, you know, most of this area has been so far since all the houses I've done for this neighborhood, which I can't remember what this neighborhood is called in Bridleton Bay, but it's like the one with the park and the vet in like the original game. Anyways, this neighborhood I've done with like a colonial kind of inspiration. So the houses have all been like white and with like white siding, and you know, it's been very clean and pretty, and that kind of continued with this build today because the inspiration I found online, the church was completely white, and that's what I ended up doing. It turns out looking really pretty. I've never built a church before. I mean, I've never really felt a need to. I'm not usually one to like build my own community lots. So if I ever want to do a church for like a wedding or something like that, generally I just get off the gallery. And even still, I don't often use churches for wedding venues, but I have used them sometimes. That all being said, this build turned out to be like really, really nice. And it was kind of surprising to me because I went into this dreading making this, you know, something brand new to me. You know, I've built community lots before, and I've built houses before, but nothing quite like this, so it ended up being really fun. And if you can see me on screen struggling now to get a foundation on this church, for some reason, the overhang I did on the second floor, so it's like 2 floors between the, like, porch, that's not what you call it, I guess a porch is what you'd call it, the overhang between the porch and I don't even know what I'm talking about now. I've lost the plot. Anyways, that was causing it to not let me do a foundation, which is so confusing. I don't know why. I thought, well, maybe because, you know, there's 4 floors on this, and 4 floors is the maximum amount you can do on a build in The Sims. But that was on the 3rd floor, so that makes no sense either. I ended up figuring it out. It took me a while. I know it was like 5 seconds on the speed build, but it took me a while to figure out. I should have seen that as like the first culprit. I deleted a lot of stuff before I went back and was like, okay, that is probably what's making this happen. Anyways, back to the save file. This build is very much an aesthetic build. It's to make the town seem more realistic and more like, you know, your typical New England small town vibes. Always has that cute church. If you've watched any show set in New England, most of them have churches, at least at some point. Like even Gilmore Girls, which like doesn't feature churches in a big capacity, has a church. And there's that whole storyline with the bell tower. And then I think specifically of Pretty Little Liars, especially when it comes to this church. I think this church is similar to the Pretty Little Liars church. I could be wrong, because it's been a long time since I watched the first season. And the first season is when the church is like most used, because we have the funeral and we have obviously the whole into season 1 storyline. I'm not going to spoil anything if you haven't seen the show. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. This save file is heavily inspired by that show and by the books. So this save file very much inspired by that small, cozy New England town with big secrets that is kind of Pretty Little Liars, especially since The community in this town is mostly very rich people, or, upper middle class to upper class. There's a few households that I've done. Well, I've done one household that I'd say is more middle class than upper middle class. And there will be one household I make that is definitely lower class, but still on the higher side of lower class. So, no matter what, basically, everyone in this town is quite rich, which is very much inspired by Pretty Little Liars, especially the books. If you read the books, in like the first book, they talk about how like only rich people live in this town and how everyone has like designer stuff and things like that. It doesn't matter. But if you haven't seen Pretty Little Liars, check it out, or check out the church in Pretty Little Liars. I could be completely wrong with saying this looks like the church in that show, by the way. Like, likely, I think it's true, but I could be remembering it completely wrong. Anywho, yes, this is a practical build. It's there to look nice, it's there to look pretty. It's not very functional when it comes to either in-game purposes or like the case file purposes to solve the mystery. Like, there's a few things you have to do in the church to go forward in the mystery, but they're not essential, and it's kind of just there to look pretty and look nice. But sometimes that's what builds are for. And if you just want to use this for your own gameplay, this is not a wedding venue, though it can be made into one, like, very easily. I think it could be really pretty as a wedding venue, but as it stands, it's not a wedding venue. There's not a wedding arch anywhere on the lot. I end up making this a park. I don't show that on camera. I ended up doing that after I stopped the speed build. But basically, all I had to do was add a chess table, like climbing gym. What is that called? Monkey bars. I don't know why that evaded my mind. But I added those two things and also like a table. And I think that was all I had to add to make this work as a park. I thought park would be good since I'll have a museum on the lot next to it. Technically, it's the town hall, but I'm going to make it a museum. And then across the street where the park usually is in Brindleton Bay will be a library. So I was like, okay, I don't want to repeat too much stuff. And there is a park down in the last area that I did down by the docks. But that park is significantly different. And this is more like I just made it a park because there's no church lot in this game. And as you can see, on the back, I tried putting doors and stairs out from the back. I end up changing that because I had to put like a platform, make a stage for where, sermons happen. So I ended up deleting those doors, place windows, and just close in that little porch area. So it's, again, for looks, not function. And you just have to kind of walk around the lot to get into the back, where I do put a graveyard. Now, obviously, Corine Sanford, the missing person in my save file, is a missing person. She is not presumed to be dead at any point in the investigation. So, because of that, the graveyard is not really significant to her story, but it looks nice, and I think it makes sense to have a small little graveyard in this town. I imagine everyone kind of buries their family at this church because, not a lot of people live here. I don't know what's a normal population for a small town, but I imagine 1,000 people live here. That's like a reasonable amount for a small town, right? Like, that's a really small town. I don't imagine it's small enough to be like 100 people by any means. Like, this is way too developed to be that small of a town. But, like 1,000 to 5,000 is my population that I think this would probably be. Yet again, I've never lived in a super small town, so I don't know what's a reasonable amount for a small town. That's what I think I've seen when I drive past small towns and they have like estimated populations and it's like 4,300. And I'm like, wow, that doesn't seem that small, but apparently that is the amount that qualifies them as a small town. And, I say that without knowing the population of all the places I've lived in. I'm sure, Seattle has way more than a couple thousand residents. So I'm not used to small town life. in any sort of capacity. I've never lived in a small town. I think I've definitely romanticized it in this save file. But sometimes it's nice to romanticize things, especially in The Sims, because there is a level of perfection that kind of exists in The Sims, if that makes any sort of sense. But this church was really fun. I'm not used to building stuff like this where it's very aesthetic and not practical. Like, I can't even think of anything that I've already made for the save file that fits within that as well. Like, all the community lots I've made have been pretty practical. I guess that's a lie. The dock, like, teen hangout that I made is pretty aesthetic, but it had a specific purpose in my mind. And I guess this also has a specific purpose in my mind. I'm just going on now about churches, but I really did struggle to build this church. I don't know why. I think it's because I just didn't know how to furnish it. Like, the outside was really easy. It surprisingly came really easy to me to build the outside and do the landscaping and make it look all pretty and autumnal, and like people visit and put flowers on the graves. Speaking of which, this one right here that I'm working on has the dirt under it, and I kind of think this is a newly dug grave. Again, not Corine's grave. I mean, unless it is, there's always the mystery aspect. But the idea is this is a newly, like, dug grave, which is really sad. But I like making The Sims a bit more realistic. I do wish I had the life and death pack for this, but I'm not made of money. I currently have no job. Speaking of which, I did get, like, updates on my visa stuff, and I should be able to send my application in this week after New Year's, which I'm really excited about because I can finally get a visa. But it's super scary because, you know, I had to send it via mail, which means I had to send my passport, like my physical passport, in the mail off to California to get it, like, to get my visa, which is scary, to part with your passport. Like, that's very personal information that I'm parting with and trusting the mail service to use well. But people do it every day, so I'm sure you'll be fine. I will get it back. I'll be able to immigrate without too many issues along the way. Hopefully. I might be dreaming too big here. Speaking of New Year's, Happy New Year! I do believe this build is coming out on New Year's Day. And I'm filming it on New Year's Eve. This is how I'm spending my New Year's Eve, because I have very little life. You know, it's fine. I'm living how I wish to live. I get to play Sims and upload videos about Sims and enjoy my autumnal builds. But Happy New Year's to everyone. I know it's probably New Year's for some people already. If I was living where I'm going to be going, it'd be New Year's already. That all being said, Happy New Year's again. And, like, happy holidays. I'm sure the holiday season is kind of over now, but I've enjoyed my holidays. I had a fun Christmas. I think I talked about it a bit in my last speed build, but I had a really nice Christmas. I got some video games. This is gonna, like, expose me, but I got a 90210 box set. I don't know if any of you guys watch 90210, and I mean, like, the original 90s TV show. But I started watching it on Pluto, and, like, if you don't watch Pluto, it's, like, a free streaming service, and there's so many ads, and I live in, like, the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I don't live in a small town. Don't question that. I don't live in a small town, but yet I live in the middle of nowhere. I promise it makes sense. I won't go into it, but I live in a place where there's very little internet connection, and watching TV shows with a bunch of ads, not good, not easy, not fun. So the box set has been a lifesaver. I don't have to watch any ads, and then it has all the episodes. That's one thing about 90210 that I hated about streaming, is that some of the episodes weren't available because of copyright reasons. Anyways, I got that. I'm on season 5. I love the show. I've binged it so much. There's so many episodes. I mean, dear Lord, the show goes on forever. But I'm on season 5. I absolutely love it. I love the 90s vibe. I've always loved 90s fashion. And, 90s fashion is kind of back in right now. Anyways, you can see me right now working on the bell tower. I'm putting quotes around that because there's not actually a bell. In this bell tower, I end up kind of trying to mimic the concept with some lights that I end up turning off in live mode before I uploaded. It's not a bell tower by any means, but I tried my absolute best to create something that looked somewhat bell tower-ish. If there is an object in The Sims that makes it, like a bell in The Sims. I don't think there is. Maybe there is one in Debug, but I did not have the energy to go searching for things, so I did what I could. And you can see me now putting in that balcony. Not that balcony, that porch. Back porch. I don't know terms. I'm trying my hardest so that I could put in a little stage. Now, forgive me, I have been to churches before. I'm not unaware of churches. I've never been to a church like this, especially one that's, I imagine, is a really old church. But I have been to churches, and I've seen the insides of them. But the problem is all the Protestant churches I've gone to, and I do imagine this is a Protestant church. All the Protestant churches I've been to have been very, I don't want to be rude, but concrete boxes that with really bad architectural style. In fact, a lot of the Protestant churches I've been to have been in coffee shops that aren't open on Sunday mornings. So, yeah, this is definitely not that. So I couldn't channel that energy. What I end up kind of channeling, I don't know if it was purposeful. I know it wasn't purposeful because honestly, it gave me a little bit of trauma. But I kind of end up making it look a little Mormon. And the whole time I was building this, and why I think I don't end up doing too much with the furnishing, except what needs to be done, is because the entire time I was making this, I was having flashbacks to being a little kid, having sleepovers at my grandma's house, and her forcibly dragging me to the LDS church services and me being bored out of my mind. And this is nothing against the LDS church, by the way. Mormons are lovely. I love you all. But, yeah, not for me. And a little bit of trauma in this build. But I survived. It was fun, for the most part. I think it ends up looking really pretty. I'm not exactly ecstatic about the final outcome, just because I think I could have done more with it, definitely. That's probably could be said of all my builds. Let's be honest, I'm not the best builder around. But I do think it ends up looking pretty good. It looks like a church at the very least. I think the furnishing is where I struggle most, because Protestant churches don't love images on their walls. So the ones that I did choose, I think specifically the one I put in the room between the two bathrooms, you'll see it at some point. That's what gave me oh my gosh, horrible, terrible Mormon artwork. I don't know if you guys have seen Mormon artwork, but they have something about making Jesus look really, really pretty, and it kind of freaks me out. Anyways, I'm done trauma dumping on all of you now. That was quite a lot. That was maybe a little too much trauma dumping for the evening. But I'm not even sure why I said evening. It's not evening for me. It won't be evening when this is uploaded, but if it's evening for you while you're watching this, then I guess it makes sense. This build obviously gave me some whiplash. I do think it's pretty. I think it ends up capturing the essence that I wished for it to capture. As far as the save file goes, the pastor who works here isn't big for the mystery, but he is Corine's pastor. She goes to church here, so he knows her. he's interacted with her. So he'll have things to say, and he's also interacted with people around town who might be more willing to talk to him than a police officer about possibly things they know that could get them in trouble. Wink, wink, if you're catching my drift. So, it's not the most important place, but it does harbor possibly some things that will end up being important for the storyline. What I'm doing right here, you'll see me struggle a lot. I'm trying to put up a little barricade. I'm thinking this is like the choir section, and I end up doing like a island living wall. It looked really bad until I changed the color. I think it works since the dark color kind of hides the islandy pattern. I think it ends up looking good. I do end up moving one of the chairs and putting in an organ, which you will see later. It makes it look a little awkward, but I was like, okay, this is a very traditional old church. We need an organ, even if it's not Catholic. I imagine there's an organ there. I've never been to an old church like this. Is it obvious that I have zero idea what I am talking about? As for all the images, like this one, I was thinking that's Noah's Ark and trying to find anything that somewhat resembled religious imagery, because this is the Sims. Religion doesn't exist. We don't have religious imagery in here, which, is a good thing. Like, let's not talk about all the stuff that would go down if we started adding religion to the Sims. I do like some of those mods that add like funny religions to the Sims, like the Watcher, I think, is one of them. That one's really fun. But this, yes, I imagine it's Protestant church. That's like really broad, and you're probably like, what denomination are you specifically thinking of? I don't know. I don't know what most Protestant denominations would be in New England in this type of church. So if you know, leave it in the comments by all means. I feel like I'm just trauma dumping at this point with like religious trauma. Let's go. They're not fun to listen to in a speed build. Not even a little bit. So let's move on. Last week I talked about how my battery was completely expanded. I got a new battery this week, like yesterday, honestly. I think it might have actually been yesterday. I got a new battery. It's not as nice as my old battery, but it's not like completely expanded. So that's a joy. I'm so excited to have an actually working battery. It's thankfully I didn't have too much damage from the expanded battery. I was worried that my keyboard and my mouse pad would be completely ruined. They're not. The keyboard's completely fine. The mouse pad has like a little bit of move to it, but nothing that I can't handle, especially since I never use it. I'm always hooked up to my monitor. But that was, I guess, my New Year's present. I get a new battery. Though ever since I put the battery in, my laptop has been so loud. So if you can hear that in the background, I'm sorry. Like, usually my laptop is loud anyways, but it's so loud ever since I put the new battery in. Don't know what's going on there, but that's what I gotta deal with, I guess, to have a battery that works. Speaking of last week, what I talked about in my speed build, I discussed like how my game was almost completely broken. I think it's been fixed by the combination of the new battery and me clearing out my tray folder, I think. And I have officially like went in and cleared out my tray folder and put all the stuff I wanted to actually keep in my gallery up on my gallery and put everything else in an external drive. So I've done that. My game is working. I haven't played live mode yet, but hopefully when I do that, it will be significantly better. Here I'm putting in the picture I talked about that gave me LDS church flashbacks back to the religious trauma, because I like to trauma dump, I guess. But yes, new battery. My fan is sad for some reason, even though I cleaned it out when I looked to see if my battery was like completely destroyed, which it was, and now I have a new one. Not as nice, but nicer than having a completely ruined one. And yes, this church ends up being not my favorite build in this save, but I think it looks really cool, especially from the map. It kind of rounds out the area, I think, especially when we put the town hall and the librarian, it will just all look very cozy and cohesive in this kind of historic town center area. I think this is a good build to put in this lot, especially since it's so tiny. There's not much you can really do with it. I didn't want to do residential because I planned out all the people for residential lots, and I didn't want to add an extra residential lot. There's already going to be an extra one for the Airbnb, so I might do that as a rental lot. I'm not sure the mechanics I want to use yet. It makes sense to just like move in since you're creating a new character to be your detective. But I like the idea of the rental. I don't know. We'll see. We'll discuss that down the line. Speaking of changes, this is the Havens Hollow save file, and the town is called Havens Hollow. And I finally figured out how to change the actual neighborhood name in The Sims this week as well. I used Sims 4 Studio. And it was really easy. I thought it was going to be super difficult and include terrible coding and make my brain hurt, but it was the easiest thing I've ever done. I'm like, why have I never done this before if it's this easy? So I downloaded Sims 4 Studio. I don't know why I didn't have it before. I swear I've had it downloaded before, but maybe not on this laptop. And I changed the name officially to Havens Hollow, and now it feels more official. It's no longer Brindleton Bay. It is Havens Hollow, and I am happy about that fact. Yeah, this ends up being the third build in this section of Havens Hollow, in the historical section, I call it. The historical square. I think I call it Concord Court in the actual save file. Anyways, this is not a house, this church is right next to Corine's house. And I do imagine she goes to church here with her family. I do also imagine that the pastor here does couples counseling for her and not for her, she's a teenager, does couple counseling for her parents. Yeah. And up here I put a coffee bar, I guess, and I put the new hot chocolate item from the holiday traditions thing, whatever it's called. I hate these gameplay stuff. They piss me off. I wish you could turn them off, or I wish they were scenarios. But, I'm also not one to say no to free stuff. I only have one thing. This is not something I've done a lot of. But that hot chocolate bar is from that holiday thing, right? I'm not just talking out of my butt here. Am I? I think so. Yeah, I just barely built this. Yes, that is from the holiday traditions thing. I'm just losing my mind. Yeah, I hate that. I hate that gameplay. I hate that it's locked behind gameplay. I hate that it's just a way for them to show that, oh, we have so many people playing our game day after day. Oh, I wonder why. Because you're enticing them with free stuff. And I am one of those people that cannot ignore it. But I'm also one of those people that wait until the last day, and I do all of it at once using UI cheats to cheat things. So, yeah. Here I am putting that organ in, and I'm getting towards the end of this build. So I guess I can stop yapping about church and things that don't matter and instead tell you that I'm very thankful that you've watched this speed build. Ends up being a cute build without much practical use, whether you're playing it just as a gameplay build for fun or if it's in the actual save file. It is in the actual save file, but if you're playing the actual save file sometime in the future when the save file is actually complete. All that being said, thank you for tuning in and watching this chaotic speed build where I did a lot of stuff and said a lot of things, and none of it really amounted to much, but at least we got a pretty build out of it. All that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of the Havens Hollow save file, and I will see you all next week.